Have you ever wondered whether you wanted to buy a remastered or classic Aeron and whether it was worth the price difference? Well, we're going to give you a quick guide on the similarities and the differences between the two. So really quickly, we're going to go through both of them and help you guys make that decision. Here we have a size C mineral remastered Aeron, and here we have a size C classic titanium refurbished Aeron by OfficeLogix, and a headrest to match it also by OfficeLogix. Now, we're going to start off with the classic because that's the one that most people know about because it's been out for over 2 decades, and that's the chair that's most common out there in the markets until this one continues to get proliferated. This one was started, the remastered was made initially in 2016, and that was the same year that the classic was discontinued. So we're going to start with the classic Aeron size C, and I'll show you some of the features really quickly. We're going to start with the tension control. The tension control on the remastered is the simple knob which has a plus minus. Forward increases the tension of the back and the minus decreases it. As if you're a heavier weight, you probably want to increase the weight and you want to go forward a lot so that you're not flying backwards. The biggest issue here with the classic is that you have to spin it significantly amount of times to increase the tension before you get any traction compared to the remastered, which I'm going to show you, which has only very few and high sensitivity in terms of the tension control. Next, you have the arm pads, which are only pivoting in terms of adjustments of the arm pads themselves, and they have a 3-notch system on the index. That 3-notch allows it to go only in 3 different settings, so all the way in, angled inwards, straight out, and then all the way out. No other differences compared to the remastered, which we're going to show you, which has a fine-tooth gear and allows it to pivot at multiple different angles and a lot smoother. Similarly, we'll talk about it as well, the remastered has a sliding mechanism in the arm pads themselves. So next, we're going to talk about the tilt control on the classic. So on the classic, we have a 90-degree tilt lock, which prevents me from leaning back beyond the 90 degrees. And then when I disengage it, I can go back as far as I want, and that's also dependent on primarily the tension control. If I put the tension control really high up and I'm a lower weight, then it'll probably feel closer to being tilt locked as opposed to not. I like it because it's simple enough, but at the same time, the remastered has multiple angles which you can lock it, and that's why I prefer the remastered in some ways as well. Next is the forward tilt. So to do that, I'm going to have to put the height all the way up and then lean backwards, push the forward tilt up, and engage it. Now the forward tilt is decent on the classic Aerons, but it's not as pronounced. A lot of people don't like it because they don't feel it's as responsive as the remastered, which we're going to show. It's only one lever, you pull it up, you lean forward while it's at the highest height, and you'll probably get just barely a 10-degree angle drop forward beyond the plane of the horizontal plane. The mesh of the Aeron. Now this is going to need a close-up. So one of the biggest things that they've changed in the classic Aeron is that versus the remastered, is that the classic Aeron does have this responsive mesh, which was great for the amount of time that it was out. But you'll start to notice that the mesh on the remastered is much more responsive even than the classic. And the reason for that is primarily due to one thing. There's a lot more DuPont hydrol and elastomeric polymer throughout the mesh on the remastered compared to the classic. Here you'll see the columns are a lot wider on the textile. What we'll also notice on the remastered is there's a lot more frequent columns and they're a lot thinner. So that allows for a lot more elastomeric polymer throughout, which is going to give you more zonal support. What they did forego in the remastered when they redesigned it is actually in the space between the mesh and the seat panel in the front, you will notice that there's no longer a seat foam, whereas the classic still has the seat foam, and they put that there so that it can prevent someone bottoming out through the mesh and onto the plastic. But here they suppose, I guess, they made the mesh strong enough so that and taut enough that it would not allow someone to bottom out. Now I have seen some people actually buy seat foam and insert that into the remastered Aerons, but that's a personal preference. Next thing is on the Classic is the adjustable lumbar. Here we have a black one. It's a size C, but you know, sometimes they do have them in titanium grade. That's fine. But either way, they will function just the same. So, as many of you know, the lumbar is just adjusted up and down through the sliding rails, and then you can adjust the firmness by flipping it to the more protruding or less protruding side of the lumbar, depending on how much pressure you want. You'll see that the lumbar of the remastered is actually has the same kind of adjustability on the rails, but instead of just being a lumbar pad, you'll see that it has a rocking mechanism that's floating and allows it to adjust with the movement of your back through the mesh. So that's why some people really like, including myself, like the lumbar on the remastered compared to the lumbar on the Classic. Now that being said, we've finished the features of the Classic. Let's move on to the remastered. First thing we're going to discuss, just the same way that we did with the Classic, we're going to talk about the tension support. So the tension is, again, plus forward, minus backwards, but you'll start to notice that it's extremely responsive in either direction. With only a few turns, it starts to respond very quickly to the amount of spins that I do. So that's one thing that it's a huge plus in terms of the remastered versus the Classic, where sometimes you have to spin a really long time before you get anything. Next, you have the tilt locks, and instead of a cable mechanism, which was on the Classic, you have a shaft mechanism. And the shaft on the inner dial for the tilt lock allows you to put it into 3 different clicks. So the first one forward is 90 degrees, the one further back is 110, and then the third click, which is completely off. I like that because sometimes you do want to lean halfway through. You don't want to be completely leaning back, but you also don't want to be at 90-degree position. So it's very convenient. And also the shaft mechanism, who knows if the chair's still out and it's new, but presumably there's less points of connections between the actuating function, and so therefore it won't fail with time and is probably more durable. Next is the forward tilt, which we mentioned is through the shaft mechanism here, and this shaft mechanism allows you to actuate the forward tilt. And the forward tilt on this one, you have to lean back and then twist the outer dial forward and then lean forward. Now, what I love about the forward tilt on the remastered is it's a very pronounced forward tilt. It's angled significantly down more than the Classic. You really feel it compared to the Classic. Forward tilt on the Classic, you probably get, I would anticipate, between 5 to 8 more degrees of angling downwards in the remastered. So that being said, it definitely is a huge boon for people that like to lean forward while they work in their chairs. And so definitely a huge plus on the remastered versus the Classic. Next, we have the arm pads, which we mentioned. They do pivot, and like we mentioned in the Classic when we were bringing it up, is that there is a fine-tooth gear, so you can hear it. That allows you a significant amount. I'm not going to count the individual gears because there are probably too many. Maybe tens of different angles. And they're actually a lot less play compared to the play in the Aeron arm pad. So that may be something that people will also consider as a huge advantage. Some people don't like that play, and it's significantly less, although it's not completely gone in the remastered. Similarly, you have a new feature in the arm pads that the Classic did not have, and that was the vertical slide mechanism of the arms, which is really big for people that sit really close to their desks, and they can push these back, especially if their arm pads are at desk height. The height adjustment of the remastered, it's the same kind of function, but better mechanism. It's on a smoother and much easier and quieter mechanism compared to the Classic's flip lever mechanism, which is, you can hear some metal on metal grinding and more of a friction there. This is not a really big feature difference, but it's just more of an aesthetic. Is the height lever is a little bit sexier on the remastered compared to the classic Aeron. You have the height functions the same way, just pulling up or down on the lever, but it is more embedded into the shape of the and aesthetic of the Aeron and a little bit more hidden compared to the classic, which can be problematic for people where they have this appendage here that can hit onto things and then break off potentially, which we've seen a ton when considering we refurbish thousands of chairs. We see this all the time where the lever and the knob have been broken off due to impact. So you have more of a appendage here that will be liable to impact. Whereas here it's a little bit more curved and blended with the shape of the chair in the remastered. That being said, the biggest boil and breakdown of the main differences between the remastered and the classic, and this is what I've been telling customers for a very long time, is it's the same functions but better mechanisms on this one. There are two more functions that are a little bit different and new in the remastered, which is you have for the first time the sliding vertical feature, and you also have for the first time a completely different lumbar that's suspended and then actually accentuates with the movement of your back. But everything else is essentially the same but better mechanisms. So you have mesh here, you have mesh in the remastered, just a newer, better type of mesh hypothetically. You have the forward tilt, you have the rear tilt in the remastered, you also have in the classic, just completely different mechanisms. I think they're functioning a little bit smoother. Is it worth it to pay the premium? Someone would have to probably take on their own and consider some other features and elements to that. So approximately there is a price difference between the two. This is running around $800 to $900 refurbished for most sellers. We have seen these size C remasters run anywhere from $1,800 to $2,000 depending on whether there's a sale or not from Herman Miller. And so you have to now evaluate on your own as a customer, is the newer mechanisms, the smoother mechanisms, and the two small features that they've implemented, like the sliding arm pads, worth the increase of $1,200 to $1,300 or not? And then again, you are getting a brand new chair with a 13-year warranty. Some suppliers provide the refurbished ones with their own small, similar warranties. That's something that you as a customer will have to decide. But like I said, I think it breaks down to same functions, better mechanisms.